There's a moment in episode 4 of the third season, Killer Within, that defines everything terrible about The Walking Dead. Laurie dies in that prison boiler room, and Carl has to shoot her before she turns. A mother asking her son to kill her. A son raising a gun to his mother's head. And the silence after the gunshot. That empty space where a goodbye should have been. It holds every impossible choice this show's ever asked its characters to make. That moment isn't just about Laurie's death. It's about what the apocalypse creates. Children who have to become executioners. Parents who turn mercy into trauma. And the reaches we make toward each other that become something darker than we intended. Tonight, we're tracing the worst character in every season of The Walking Dead. But worst doesn't mean most evil. It means most damaging to the people trying to survive around them. Sometimes the worst aren't villains. They're broken people whose choices echo long after they're gone. Let's explore that together, gently, one season at a time. Season 1 gives us Merle Dixon, and he's easy to hate. In episode 2, Guts, he's handcuffed to that rooftop in Atlanta, hurling racist slurs at T-Dog, beating him, poisoning the group's cohesion with every word. And when Rick handcuffs him and the group leaves him behind, it feels like justice. But here's what makes Merle the worst character of Season 1. He's not just an individual problem. He's a symbol of everything pre-apocalypse that should have died, but didn't. Tribalism, prejudice, the idea that some people matter less than others based on skin color or background. The walkers don't care about race. They'll eat anyone. But Merle brought the old world's hatreds into the new one. And that divide, that poison, it's more dangerous than any walker herd because it comes from inside the group. Daryl's shame is the emotional anchor here. He loves his brother. You can see it in Norman Reedus' face every time Merle's mentioned. That conflict between loyalty and recognition that Merle's toxic. Daryl knows what Merle is, knows the group's right to be afraid of him, but family's family. And that tension between loving someone and knowing their poison, it's one of the most human struggles The Walking Dead explores. In Season 1, Daryl has to choose, follow Merle's path, or become someone better. And the fact that he chooses better, that he stays with the group even after they left Merle on that roof, it shows that Dahl's not Merle, but Merle's presence, even in absence, shapes Daryl's entire arc. The brother he loves is the man he's fighting not to become. The theory here is that worst doesn't mean most evil. The governor's more evil. Negan's more brutal. But Merle's the worst in Season 1 because he represents internal threat, the kind communities can't wall out or shoot. He's the test of whether the group can hold together when someone inside is trying to tear them apart. And the pattern TWD establishes here, one it'll repeat for 11 seasons, is that external threats are manageable. You can fight walkers, defend against raiders, survive storms. But internal poison, prejudice, mistrust, people who prioritize themselves over the group, that's what destroys communities from within. Merle's the first character to show us that the call's coming from inside the house. The apocalypse didn't create monsters. It just revealed who already was one. And sometimes the person you have to fear most is the one sleeping next to you, the one you trust, the one you love. That's what Merle teaches us. And Daryl, carrying that lesson, spends the rest of the series proving he's not his brother. But the fact that he has to prove it, that the question's always there, that's Merle's lasting damage. Some poison doesn't kill you fast. It just makes you question yourself forever. Season 2's worst character is Shane Walsh. And I know that's going to upset people because Shane's fascinating, compelling, and in a lot of ways, right? But let's be clear about what we're measuring. Shane's the worst not because he's evil. He's not. But because he proves something devastating. You can save people and still lose them. You can make all the hard choices, do all the brutal work, sacrifice pieces of your soul to keep a group alive, and they'll still choose someone else to follow. And that realization, that proof that pragmatism isn't enough, that survival requires something more than just being willing to do violence, it breaks Shane completely. By season 2, episode 18, Beside the Dying Fire, when Shane tries to kill Rick in those woods, he's not even recognizable as the man who protected Laurie and Carl at the start. He's something else. Something the apocalypse made. And the tragedy is that his methods worked, but his humanity didn't survive them. Let's look at the evidence. Shane's strategies keep people alive. When he assaults the barn in episode 7, pretty much dead already, and forces the group to confront that Sophia's dead, that walkers can't be saved, he's right. Keeping walkers in that barn was dangerous, irrational, based on Herschel's denial. Shane shatters that denial with bullets, and it's brutal, and it traumatizes everyone, but it's also necessary. When he sacrifices Otis in episode 3, save the last one, shooting him in the leg to escape walkers and save Carl, it's monstrous and pragmatic at the same time. Otis dies, but Carl lives, and Shane carries the weight of that choice in every scene afterward. You can see it in John Bernthal's performance, the way Shane's eyes don't quite meet anyone's, the way he shaves his head like he's trying to shed the man he used to be. Shane's doing what Rick won't, what the group needs but can't ask for, and it's killing him. But here's the emotional core. Shane's watching Rick lead, watching people follow Rick, and he knows Rick's surviving because Shane's doing the ugly work. Rick gets to keep his morality because Shane's losing his. And that's unbearable. Shane loves these people. He'd die for them. But they'll never choose him because leadership isn't just about keeping people alive. It's about keeping them believing survival's worth it. Rick offers hope, even when it's irrational. Shane offers survival, even when it's brutal. And the group chooses hope every time. Shane's face, watching Rick make decisions Shane thinks are stupid. Watching the group follow Rick anyway. It's the face of a man realizing he's losing something he never really had. Laurie, the group's trust, the future he imagined. All of it slipping away, and the harder he fights to hold on, the faster it slips. The question Shane's story asks, the one we're still arguing about in the fandom, is this. Was Shane right? Did his brutality keep people alive in a way Rick's idealism couldn't? Or did Rick's idealism only work because Shane did the ugly work first? And once Shane was gone, Rick had to become Shane to survive. There's no clean answer. And that's what makes Shane the worst character of season 2. He's a mirror, showing us what survival costs. He proves you can save people and still lose them. That doing the necessary thing doesn't make you the hero, that the apocalypse doesn't care about your sacrifices. Shane tried to be what the group needed, and it destroyed him, and the group kept going without him. And maybe that's the cruelest thing of all. He died believing he was essential, and the group survived his death just fine. What does that say about sacrifice? About leadership? about the difference between being needed and being wanted. Shane never figured it out, and by the time he tried to kill Rick, by the time Rick stabbed him and Carl shot him, Shane wasn't trying to survive anymore. He was just trying to prove he mattered. And that desperation, that need to be seen, to be chosen, to be necessary, it's one of the most human things the show's ever portrayed. And it makes Shane both tragic and the worst because his inability to accept that survival isn't the same as being loved. That's what killed him. Not Rick, not Walker's. Just the unbearable weight of trying to save people who'd never thank him for it. Season 3 gives us Laurie Grimes. And before anyone gets defensive, let's be clear. This isn't about hating Laurie. It's about recognizing that some of the worst damage in The Walking Dead comes not from cruelty, but from indecision, from people who won't own their choices and force others to choose for them. Laurie dies in Season 3, Episode 4, Killer Within, in that boiler room, and her death's tragic and heartbreaking. But the damage she did to Rick, to Shane, to Carl, to the entire group's dynamics, it happened long before that C-section. It happened through Seasons 1, 2, and 3, every time she created a situation and then stepped back, letting the men in her life fight over what to do. And the cost of that indecision, the bodies it left behind, the trauma it created, that's what makes Laurie the worst character of Season 3. Let's trace the pattern. In Season 1 and early Season 2, Shane tells Laurie that Rick's dead. He believes it. He checked Rick's pulse at the hospital, heard no heartbeat, saw the chaos, and Laurie, grieving, alone, with Carl to protect. She accepts comfort from Shane. She starts a relationship with him, and when Rick returns alive, Laurie's horror and guilt are real. But instead of owning the choice she made, I thought you were dead. I needed help. I turned to Shane. She turns on Shane. She makes him the villain. She tells him to stay away, that what they had was a mistake, that he needs to accept Rick's back, and things are different. And Shane, who loves her, who thought they were building something, he's devastated and angry. And Laurie, instead of managing that, instead of being clear and final, she vacillates. She sends mixed signals. She asks Shane for help with Rick, then recoils when Shane interprets it as her wanting him. She creates the Rick-Shane conflict by being the thing they both want and won't clearly choose between. And then there's Carl. In Season 2, Carl's getting into danger constantly, wandering off, getting shot, almost dying. And Laurie's parenting is inconsistent, swinging between overprotective and neglectful. She tells Carl to stay close, then doesn't notice when he wanders into the woods. She wants him safe, but won't enforce the boundaries that'd keep him safe. And Carl, reading that inconsistency, stops listening to her. He starts making his own calls, taking risks. And by Season 3, he's shooting his own mother because she didn't prepare him for the world, but forced him into it anyway. The image of Carl, young and traumatized, raising that gun to Laurie's head, it's one of the most devastating in the series. And it's the culmination of Laurie's inability to be clear, to be decisive, to own her role in shaping the people around her. Here's the question I want you to think about. Would you have made different choices in Laurie's position? She's grieving, terrified, responsible for a child in the apocalypse. Shane offers protection, comfort, stability. Is it wrong to accept that? And when Rick returns, is it wrong to feel horror and guilt and confusion? Laurie's not a villain. She's a human in an impossible situation. But the difference between a tragic character And a worst character is whether they own their choices or avoid them. Laurie avoided. She let Rick and Shane's tension build without addressing it directly. She let Carl drift without setting clear expectations. And when she died, when Carl had to shoot her, the guilt didn't die with her. It transferred to Rick, who spent the next several episodes hallucinating phone calls from her, hearing her voice, unable to process the loss, because their last interactions were full of unresolved tension and resentment. The theory here is that The Walking Dead punishes characters who won't own their choices. Rick owns his. Even when he's wrong, he makes a call and lives with it. Shane owns his, even when they destroy him. But Laurie doesn't own hers, and that avoidance creates a vacuum where other people's choices rush in to fill the space. The Rick-Shane war, the thing that defines Season 2. It's Laurie's creation through her inability to be clear about what she wanted, who she chose, what the boundaries were. And Shane dies because of it. Rick's broken because of it. Carl's forced to kill his mother because of it. Laurie's worse not because she's cruel, but because her kindness, her desire not to hurt anyone, ends up hurting everyone. And her death, which should bring closure, just haunts Rick for seasons. Guilt's a slower killer than Walker's, and Laurie's legacy is guilt. For Rick, for Carl, for Shane's memory. And that's the cost of avoiding choices in the apocalypse. Someone else makes them for you, and you live or die with what they decide. Season 4 brings back the governor, and that might seem like a strange choice for worst character when he was already the villain of Season 3. But here's what makes Philip Blake the worst specifically in Season 4. He had a chance at redemption, a real chance to become someone different, and he chose vengeance anyway. In episodes 6 and 7, Live Bait and Dead Weight, we see the governor after Woodbury's fall, broken and alone, and he finds a new family. Tara, Lily, and Megan. They don't know who he was, what he did, and they give him a chance to be someone better. And for a moment, it looks like he might take it. He protects Megan, connects with Lily, shows vulnerability, but then, in episode 8, Too Far Gone, he's back at the prison with a tank, Michonne and Herschel as hostages, demanding Rick's group, leave or die. And when Rick offers to share the prison, when Herschel's pleading for peace, the governor decapitates Herschel with Michonne's katana. And the prison burns, and people die, and the governor's killed soon after. But the damage is permanent. The emotional anchor here is Herschel's severed head. Herschel, the moral center of the group, the man who believed in second chances, in farming, in building something better than just survival. And the governor kills him, not in rage, not in self-defense, but as a statement. There's no compromise, no coexistence, just me or you. And that choice, that refusal of the possibility Rick offered, it's what makes the governor the worst in Season 4. Because trauma can break you, can turn you into someone you don't recognize. But it doesn't erase choice. The governor chose vengeance over family. He chose to destroy the prison rather than walk away. And that choice, made after he'd seen another path, after he'd held Megan and felt something like hope again, that's unforgivable. The theory here is that the governor represents what happens when trauma calcifies into identity. He lost his daughter Penny in Season 3, lost Woodbury, and instead of processing that loss, he made it who he was, the man who lost everything and would make everyone else lose too. And when Tara's group offered him a new identity, a chance to be someone defined by protection rather than revenge. He couldn't take it. Because if he stopped being the governor, if he stopped seeking revenge on Rick and Michonne, then he'd have to face what he'd become. And facing that was harder than dying. So he chose death for himself and for Herschel and for the prison community, because destruction was easier than change. Here's the question. Can someone who's done what the governor did ever stop? Can trauma be so deep, so defining, that redemption's impossible? Or is redemption always a choice, and the governor just didn't choose it? I don't have the answer. And I don't think the show does either. But the contrast between Rick and the governor is striking. Both men lost people. Both faced trauma. But Rick became better through it. Harder, yes, but also more protective, more determined to build something. The governor became worse. And the difference between them isn't strength or leadership or even morality. It's what they chose to do with their pain. Rick turned his into purpose. The governor turned his into a weapon. And Herschel, kind and wise and believing in the possibility of peace, right up until the moment his head was severed. He's the cost of the governor's refusal to change. And that makes the governor, in season 4, not just a villain, but the worst. Someone who saw another path and chose destruction anyway. Season 5 introduces us to Gareth and Terminus. And if you're thinking, aren't cannibals obviously the worst? Yes, but let's dig deeper. Gareth, played chillingly by Andrew J. West, isn't worst because he eats people. He's worst because he's logical about it. In episode 1, No Sanctuary, Gareth explains Terminus's evolution. You're either the butcher or the cattle. They tried to be sanctuary. People came, took over, brutalized them. And when Gareth's group took Terminus back, they decided never to be cattle again. So they became butchers. They lured people in, processed them, ate them. And Gareth talks about it like it's resource management, like they've simply adapted to reality. And that logic without ethics, that pragmatism taken to its extreme, that's what makes Gareth the worst character of season 5. Bob's leg is the emotional anchor. In episode 2, Strangers, Bob's captured, and he wakes up to find Gareth and the Terminus survivors eating his leg in front of him. And Bob starts laughing, because he's been bitten, he's infected, and they're eating tainted meat. And Gareth's face, when he realizes it's not horror at the sin of cannibalism, it's annoyance at a logistical problem. That disconnect, that ability to process eating a person as just a setback in the food chain, it shows how far Gareth's fallen. He's not insane. He's not cruel for cruelty's sake. He's just decided that survival justifies anything. And once you accept that premise, once you make that leap, there's no bottom. There's just choices. And all of them are permissible if they keep you alive another day. The theory here is that Gareth shows how doing what's necessary becomes justification for anything. Shane argued this in season 2, that survival requires hard choices. The governor embodied it in seasons 3 and 4, that the weak die and the strong take what they need. But Gareth takes it further. He's not taking supplies or territory. He's taking people. He's reducing humans to meat, to resources. And he's doing it calmly, rationally, like it's the only logical response to the apocalypse. And in a way, he's right. If survival's the only goal, if there's no morality, no lines you won't cross, then cannibalism's just another adaptation. It's protein. It's sustenance. It solves the food problem. But Rick's response, In episode 3, Four Walls and a Roof, it's the show's answer to Gareth's logic. Rick doesn't arrest Gareth. He doesn't imprison him or exile him. He beats him to death with his bare hands, machete, brutal and bloody, in that church. And the violence is excessive, personal, and in that moment, Rick's become what he's fighting. He's the butcher. But the difference, the thing that makes Rick not Gareth, is that Rick's violence has a purpose beyond survival. It's protection. It's eliminating a threat to his people. It's drawing a line that says, you don't get to do this, and live. And Gareth dies not understanding that line, because to him, survival was the only value. And Rick, covered in Gareth's blood, proves that there are things worse than dying. And one of them is becoming Gareth. Here's the question that still haunts me. When Rick killed Gareth in that church, when he promised he would, and then followed through with brutal efficiency, who was worse in that moment? Gareth, who'd crossed so many lines he couldn't see them anymore, or Rick, who crossed them deliberately, with full awareness, because he'd decided some people don't deserve mercy? The show doesn't answer. It just shows us Michonne's face, Abraham's, Sasha's. All of them watching Rick beat a man to death and not stopping him, because Gareth was worst in season 5. But Rick's response, that brutality, it's the seed of what Rick becomes later. The man who can kill without hesitation, who can make the hard call, who can be Shane when he needs to be. And Gareth, dying on that church floor, he's the mirror showing Rick what happens when survival's the only goal. You become meat, that's all you are, and that's all you see in others. And maybe that's the most terrifying thing Terminus taught us. Not that people can become cannibals, but that they can do it calmly, logically, and never see the horror of what they've become. Season 6 gives us Ron Anderson, and he's easy to overlook. He's a teenager, traumatized, angry, and his story ends quickly in episode 9, No Way Out, when Michonne kills him after he shoots Carl's eye out. But Ron's the worst character of season 6, not because of what he does, but because of what he represents. The cost of Rick's methods, the children the apocalypse creates, the rage we ignore until it's too late. Ron's father, Pete, was abusive. We see it in season 5, the bruises on Jesse, the fear in Ron's eyes. And Rick kills Pete in episode 16, Conquer, executes him in front of the community because Reg dies, and Rick's been given authority to act. And Ron watches his father die, watches Rick kill him, and no one asks Ron if he's okay. No one sits with his grief. No one acknowledges that even abusive fathers are still fathers. And losing one leaves a wound. Carl tries. In season 6, Carl reaches out to Ron, tries to be his friend, teach him to survive. But Ron doesn't want survival lessons from the son of the man who killed his father. He wants revenge, and he gets a gun, hides it, and when the walkers breach Alexandria in episode 9, when everything's chaos and death, Ron points it at Rick. Carl sees, covers the gun with his hand, and Ron pulls the trigger. The bullet goes through Carl's hand and into his eye, and Michonne puts her sword through Ron's chest. And Jessie, Ron's mother, is torn apart by walkers seconds later while still holding Carl's hand. It's a cascade of death, all happening in seconds, and it starts with Ron's rage that no one tended. The emotional anchor is Carl's hand covering the gun. He's trying to protect his father, but he's also trying to protect Ron from making a choice he can't take back. And Ron makes it anyway, and Carl loses an eye, because Rick couldn't see Ron's pain, couldn't understand that killing Pete wasn't just removing a threat, It was creating another one. Ron's rage, that festering anger. It's the cost of Rick's leadership style in season 5 and 6. When he's hard and decisive and willing to kill to protect his people, but not willing to tend the wounds those killings create in others. Rick saves Jesse and Carl from Pete's abuse, but he doesn't save Ron from the trauma of watching his father die. And that oversight, that failure to see the child as someone who matters, it costs Carl his eye. Here's the question I want you to think about. Was Rick wrong to kill Pete? Pete was abusive, dangerous, a threat to Jesse, and possibly others. In the old world, he'd be arrested, jailed, removed from the home. But in the apocalypse, there's no jail. There's just exile or execution. And Rick chose execution because it was cleaner, final. Was that wrong? Or was ignoring Ron's grief afterward the real mistake? Could Rick have killed Pete and still tended Ron, acknowledged his pain, given him space to process? Or is that too much to ask in a world where every day's a fight to survive? The theory here is that Ron's the worst character of season 6 because he's the child soldier the apocalypse creates. He's not born violent. He's made violent by trauma, by loss, by a world that doesn't give him time to grieve. And when he acts, when he pulls that trigger, he's not trying to survive. He's trying to hurt the person who hurt him. And that revenge, that need to make Rick feel what Ron feels, it's human and understandable and also unforgivable. Because Carl, innocent Carl, who tried to be Ron's friend, loses an eye. And Ron dies knowing he hurt someone who didn't deserve it. And that's the tragedy of child soldiers, of kids raised in war. They learn to fight, but they don't always learn who to fight. They just know they're angry, and someone has to pay. Carl loses an eye because Rick couldn't see Ron's pain. And that sentence, that cause and effect, it's the pattern season 6 establishes. Leadership isn't just making hard choices. It's living with the consequences. And sometimes the consequences are children with guns. And sometimes you don't see them coming until it's too late. Ron's the worst not because he's the most dangerous, but because he's the most preventable. And no one prevented him. And Carl paid the price. And Rick, holding Carl in that infirmary, finally understands what Shane knew, and Laurie feared, and the governor embodied. Every choice in this world creates ripples, and sometimes those ripples drown the people you love most, and there's no taking it back. There's just living with it, if you survive. Season 7 is Negan, obviously, undeniably. Jeffrey Dean Morgan, swinging Lucille, that barbed wire wrapped bat, and killing Glenn and Abraham in episode 1. The day will come when you won't be. It's the most brutal, traumatic scene in the series, and Negan's the most charismatic, terrifying villain The Walking Dead ever produced. But here's what makes Negan the worst character specifically in season 7. It's not just what he does, it's how he makes you complicit. In episode 4, Service, Rick has to thank Negan for killing his friends. Negan takes half of Alexandria's supplies, humiliates Rick, and then makes Rick say thank you. And Rick does. Because his people are alive, and keeping them alive requires submission, and Negan's broken him completely. That power, the power to make someone thank you for their trauma, that's what makes Negan worst. Let's look at the emotional weight. Maggie's scream when Glenn dies. It's one of the most gutting sounds in television. Lauren Cohan's performance is raw, primal. The sound of a woman watching her husband's head beaten to pulp while she's pregnant with his child. And Abraham's death before it, his defiance, Suck my nuts. It's bravery, but it's also pointless. He dies. And then Daryl, unable to control his grief and rage, punches Negan. And Negan kills Glenn as punishment. And Daryl's guilt, the knowledge that his action caused Glenn's death, it breaks him. Norman Reedus plays Daryl's trauma quietly, with hunched shoulders and averted eyes. And you can see he's carrying weight he'll never put down. Negan doesn't just kill. He makes the survivors complicit in each other's death, makes them feel responsible, makes them break. The theory here is that Negan's the worst because he makes you complicit. The Savior's system, the tribute, the I'm Negan chant, it's designed to make everyone part of the machine. You're not just a victim, you're a participant. You provide half your supplies. And in return, Negan doesn't kill you. You submit, and you live. And that choice, that constant grinding choice between submission and death, it's worse than just being killed, because you have to wake up every day and make it again, and Negan knows this. He's not stupid or crazy. He's strategic. He breaks leaders by making them complicit in their own people's suffering. And Rick, watching Negan take Alexandria's mattresses, their weapons, their dignity, and having to say thank you, that's Rick being broken. And we watch it happen. And it's unbearable. But here's the question that's divided the fandom for years. When did you start sympathizing with Negan? Was it Season 8, when he's losing the war? Season 9, when he's imprisoned and talking to Judith? Season 10, when he kills Alpha to protect the communities? Or has he never earned your sympathy because nothing he does later erases Glenn's death, Abraham's death, the trauma he inflicted? There's no right answer. Some fans see Negan's arc as redemption. Others see it as the show trying to rehabilitate someone irredeemable. And both perspectives are valid, because Negan's complexity, his humor, his code, he doesn't kill kids, doesn't rape. It makes him human. But his actions, the lineup, the savagery, the control, they make him monstrous. And the show asks us to hold both truths at once. The pattern here is that The Walking Dead's best villains reflect the protagonist's potential darkness. Negan's what Rick could become if he decided power was survival's only tool. He's Shane's logic taken to its empire-building extreme. He's the governor's brutality with a smile. And he's worst in Season 7 because he's the proof that Rick can be broken, that the man who survived Shane and the governor and Terminus can be reduced to a shell, thanking his oppressor, playing the long game, but losing pieces of himself in the process. And when Rick finally rebels, when the war starts in the Season 7 finale, it's not because he's found strength, it's because Negan's finally pushed him past breaking into something harder, colder, more willing to sacrifice. And that transformation, that necessity, it's Negan's lasting gift. He didn't just break Rick, he rebuilt him into someone who can beat Negan. And whether that's a win or another kind of loss, the show leaves us to decide. Season 8's worst character isn't Negan, even though the war continues. It's Gregory, the sniveling leader of Hilltop, who betrays his own people repeatedly, tries to kill Maggie, sells out Hilltop's location to the Saviors, and eventually gets hanged by Maggie in Season 9, Episode 1. Gregory's worst not because he's powerful or brutal. He's worst because he's a coward. And cowards are more dangerous than tyrants because you can't predict them. Negan's brutal, but he has a code. He's consistent. You know what he'll do. Gregory has no code. He'll side with whoever's winning, betray whoever's losing, and lie to everyone. And that unpredictability, that total lack of principle, makes him worse than the villain leading armies. Let's trace Gregory's betrayals. In Season 8, when the war's raging, Gregory sides with the Saviors, even though Hilltop's part of Rick's coalition. He tries to turn Hilltop against Maggie, fails, flees to the sanctuary. Then, when the Saviors are losing, he tries to come back, tries to kill Maggie to regain control. And when that fails, he's pathetic, begging, promising he'll be good. And Maggie, who's shown him mercy over and over, who gave him chances no one else would have, she's done. In Season 9, Episode 1, A New Beginning, she hangs him, and Daryl and Michonne watch, and no one stops her, because Gregory exhausted every ounce of patience, every benefit of doubt, and proved he'd never change. The emotional anchor is the rope and Maggie's face. She's not angry when she hangs Gregory. She's tired. It's a decision she's made calmly. The same way Rick killed Gareth. The same way Carol's made hard calls. And Gregory, standing on that platform, is still trying to negotiate, still believing he can talk his way out. And Maggie doesn't even respond. She just signals, and Gregory drops, and it's over. And the silence after. Daryl and Michonne's faces. It's not horror. It's acceptance. Because Gregory's death isn't murder. It's consequence. He had chances, made choices, and this is where they led. The theory here is that cowards are more dangerous than tyrants because you can't predict them. Negan, for all his brutality, he tells you what he's going to do. He's theatrical, makes speeches, enjoys the performance. But you know where you stand. Gregory lies, shifts, betrays, and you never know when the knife's coming because Gregory doesn't even know. He reacts to whatever's happening, sides with whoever's scariest. And the moment the balance shifts, he shifts too. And communities can't function like that. Trust requires consistency. And Gregory's betrayed trust so many times that Maggie's decision isn't revenge. It's necessity. He's a threat that can't be rehabilitated or exiled or ignored. He's a cancer, and the only option left is removal. Here's the question the show doesn't answer. Is Gregory's hanging justice or revenge? Maggie says it's justice, that Gregory tried to kill her, that he's betrayed Hilltop too many times. But she's also the widow of the man Negan killed, the leader struggling to hold Hilltop together, and Gregory represents everything weak and selfish and cowardly that could undermine her authority. So is she executing a traitor or eliminating a rival? And does the distinction matter if the outcome's the same? The show lets us sit with that ambiguity. Daryl doesn't stop her. Michonne doesn't stop her. They watch, and then they move on. And Gregory, the man who spent 3 seasons trying to save himself at everyone else's expense, he dies how he lived. Alone, unloved, unmourned. And maybe that's the real punishment. Not the rope, the fact that no one cared enough to cut it. Season 9 introduces Alpha, and she's terrifying in ways the show's never explored before. Played with chilling calm by Samantha Morton, Alpha's the leader of the Whisperers, the group that wears walker skins and lives among the dead. But Alpha's the worst character of Season 9, not because of the Pikes, though those are horrifying. It's because she weaponizes love. In Episode 12, Guardians, she tells Lydia, her daughter, something approximating you have to love someone to truly hurt them. And that philosophy, that perversion of motherhood and protection, that's what makes Alpha monstrous. She doesn't just kill. She makes love a tool for control, pain, and manipulation. And every relationship she touches, she poisons. The Pikes are the emotional anchor. Episode 15, The calm before. Alpha kidnaps members of the communities during the fair, kills them, and places their severed heads on pikes along the border. Tara, Enid, Henry, people we've known for seasons, dead, reanimated, their heads displayed as a warning. And Carol, finding Henry's pike, her adopted son's head. It breaks her. Melissa McBride's performance is devastating. The way Carol's face just empties. She doesn't scream. She doesn't cry. She just stares. And you can see something inside her die. And that's Alpha's goal. Not just to kill, but to traumatize. To break the survivors emotionally. To prove that caring about people makes you weak. And for a while, it works. The communities retreat. They're terrified. And Alpha, wearing her walker skin, walks through herds without fear because she's chosen not to care. And in her mind, that makes her strong. But Lydia's the counter-narrative. Lydia, Alpha's daughter. She escapes to the communities, bonds with Daryl and others, and she's proof that Alpha's wrong. Lydia cares. And it doesn't make her weak. It makes her human. And Daryl, choosing to protect Lydia even when Alpha threatens war. It's Daryl choosing the kind of person he wants to be. Not the person Merle was. Not the person Alpha wants him to be. But someone who protects kids because it's right. And Alpha, watching Lydia choose the communities over her, it's the first crack in her philosophy. Because if caring makes you weak, why does Lydia's choice hurt? Why does Alpha feel anything? And the answer, the one Alpha can't admit, is that she does love Lydia. She's just chosen to express it through control, abuse, and terror. And when Carol kills Alpha in season 10, when she lures her into a cabin and Negan slits her throat, it's not just a strategic victory. It's a mother avenging her son by killing another mother who hurt hers. The theory here is that Alpha's the worst because she makes love a weapon. Every villain in The Walking Dead is dangerous, but most of them want something: power, safety, revenge. Alpha wants nothing except to prove that caring is weakness, and she's willing to destroy everything, including her own daughter, to prove it. And that nihilism, that rejection of connection as survival's foundation, it's the darkest philosophy the show's presented. Because if Alpha's right, if love is just vulnerability, then what's the point of surviving? What are we fighting for? And the communities, banding together to defeat the Whisperers, they're answering that question. Love isn't weakness. It's the reason to fight. And Alpha, dying without ever understanding that she's the worst because she spent her entire life proving a point that wasn't true. And the people she hurt proving it, they're the cost of her philosophy. Here's the question. Could Alpha have been saved? If Lydia had reached her earlier, if someone had shown her another way before she became the Whisperer leader, could she have been different? Or was she always this? Someone so broken by trauma that she'd weaponize even motherhood? I don't know. The show gives us glimpses of Alpha's past, hints of abuse and loss. But it doesn't excuse her. It just explains. And maybe that's enough. Maybe the worst people aren't born monsters. They're made by choices and trauma and the refusal to heal. And Alpha, wearing a dead woman's face, walking among corpses, she's the ultimate refusal. She rejected humanity, rejected love, and proved that you can survive without either. But survival without humanity isn't victory. It's just existing. And when Carol killed her, when Negan cut her throat, Alpha's last expression wasn't fear. It was surprise. She'd forgotten what it felt like to be human enough to die. Season 10 gives us Beta. And if Alpha weaponized love, Beta weaponizes worship. After Alpha's death in episode 12, Walk With Us, Beta becomes the Whisperer's leader. And he doesn't just lead, he escalates. He collects a massive herd, leads them to Alexandria. And in episode 16, A Certain Doom, he dies not fighting to survive, but fighting to become part of the horde. His mask's torn away, his face revealed, and fans noted he looks like a pre-apocalypse celebrity, a half-giant country music star. And instead of running, he lets the walkers surround him, bite him, consume him. And his last words spoken to Daryl are approximately, "I am the end of everything." And that philosophy, that nihilism beyond even Alpha's, makes Beta the worst character of Season 10. Beta's worst because he stops fighting to survive and starts fighting to end. Alpha, for all her darkness, she wanted the Whisperers to survive. She had a vision, twisted as it was, of humanity adapting to the walkers, becoming part of the natural order. But Beta doesn't want adaptation. He wants oblivion. He worships the dead, not as a survival strategy, but as a theology. The walkers are angels to him, and joining them is transcendence. And when Alpha dies, when the person he worshipped is gone, Beta doesn't grieve in any normal way. He doubles down. He decides that if Alpha's dead, then everything should be, and he leads a herd to Alexandria, not to conquer it, but to erase it. The emotional anchor is Beta's walker-covered walk. In Season 10, he kills a group of survivors, takes their blood and guts, covers himself, and walks through the herd. And the walkers ignore him, and Beta smiles. It's one of the creepiest moments in the series, because you can see he's not pretending to be dead. He feels dead. He's chosen death as identity. And when Daryl fights him in episode 16, when they're struggling on that hospital roof, Beta's not trying to win. He's trying to become. And when the walkers pull him down, when they bite into him, his face is peaceful. He's finally what he wanted to be. And Daryl, watching, doesn't even look relieved. He just looks tired. Because you can't defeat someone who wants to lose. The theory is that Beta represents the Walking Dead's darkest villain archetype. People who don't want power. They want oblivion. The governor wanted control. Negan wanted empire. Alpha wanted to prove caring was weak. But Beta wants nothing except to end. And that makes him impossible to negotiate with. Impossible to reason with. Impossible to save. He's suicidal, but weaponized. He's taking as many people with him as possible on his way to becoming a walker. And the communities, fighting him, they're fighting someone who's already dead inside. And that's terrifying because how do you defeat someone who's already given up on being alive? The pattern here is that TWD's villains get darker as the show progresses. Early villains wanted safety, the Vatos, control, the governor, resources, Terminus. But later, villains want destruction. Alpha wanted to erase civilization. Beta wants to erase existence. And the escalation, the movement from survive at any cost to destroy because survival's meaningless, it's the show's thesis about trauma. If you don't process it, if you don't find meaning beyond just not dying, then eventually the nihilism wins. And Beta's the endpoint of that philosophy. He's what happens when you decide the apocalypse is the point, not the obstacle. Beta's death is poetic. He's consumed by the thing he worshipped, torn apart by walkers, and his body becomes part of the herd he led. And there's no resurrection, no redemption, no last-minute realization. He dies believing he was right, that death is the answer, that the walkers are the truth, and humanity's the lie. And maybe that's the saddest thing. Not that he died, but that he died happy. because he never found anything in life worth living for. And the communities, surviving him, surviving the herd, they're proof he was wrong. They found reasons. Family, hope, each other. And Beta, walking among the dead, he never understood that. And that's what makes him worst. Not the people he killed, though there are many, but the fact that he proved you can survive the apocalypse and still lose completely, because survival without meaning is just waiting to die. And Beta stopped waiting. He embraced it, and the world somehow kept turning without him. Season 11, the final season, gives us Lance Hornsby, and he's a different kind of worst. Played by Josh Hamilton, Lance is the Commonwealth's deputy governor, a bureaucrat with a smile and a spreadsheet, and blood on his hands he'll never acknowledge. He manipulates, orchestrates, causes the massacre at Hilltop, and when Carol kills him in episode 22, it's quiet. No grand confrontation. Just Carol with a gun, Lance in an office, and the understanding that some people are too dangerous to leave alive. Lance is worst not because he's brutal like Negan or nihilistic like Beta. He's worst because he believes he's saving civilization, and that belief lets him justify anything. And systems, the Commonwealth's class structure and bureaucracy, they hide his cruelty behind paperwork and procedure. Let's look at the evidence. Lance orchestrates attacks on the communities, frames it as Commonwealth expansion, and when people die, he files reports. He doesn't swing a bat, he signs orders. And the distance, the removal, it lets him sleep at night. When he's confronted, he doesn't rage. He explains calmly that he's doing what's necessary to preserve humanity's future. And he believes it. That's what makes him terrifying. He's not lying. He's convinced himself that his position, his authority, his vision of civilization, they're worth any cost. And the cost is bodies, communities destroyed, trust broken. But Lance never sees the bodies. He just sees reports, numbers, outcomes, and that dehumanization, that ability to cause suffering without witnessing it. It's the banality of evil. The emotional anchor is Carol's quiet kill. In episode 22, Faith, Carol finds Lance, and he tries to talk, to negotiate, to explain, and Carol just shoots him. Melissa McBride plays it without emotion, without hesitation, and the gun's silence after, assuming suppressor, is louder than any speech. Because Carol's learned, over 11 seasons, that some people can't be reasoned with. They can only be stopped. And Lance, who thought his position protected him, who thought he could manipulate anyone, he dies without understanding that Carol's beyond his reach. She doesn't care about his justifications. She cares about protecting her people. And Lance is a threat, so he dies. And Carol doesn't even stay to watch. She just leaves. And Lance bleeds out in an office, alone, unmourned. Here's the question that haunts me. Is Lance worse than Negan? Lance killed more people, arguably, through his orchestrations and orders. But Negan killed directly, personally, made it theatre. Lance's kills are statistical. Does that make them worse? Or does Negan's brutality, the way he made people watch, made them complicit, does that make him worse? There's no easy answer. But the pattern's clear. The Walking Dead shows us that cruelty hiding behind systems is just as dangerous as cruelty with a bat. Maybe more so, because you can fight a man with a bat. How do you fight paperwork? How do you fight orders that come from somewhere else, signed by someone you never see? How do you resist a system that insists it's helping you even as it exploits you? The theory here is that Lance represents the final evolution of villainy in TWD, the bureaucrat. He's not a warlord or a cult leader or a nihilist. He's middle management with delusions of grandeur. And he shows how civilization, the thing the communities are trying to rebuild, can be just as oppressive as the apocalypse if it's built on inequality, exploitation, and control. The Commonwealth, for all its resources and people, it's a system that serves the elite and uses the working class. And Lance, believing in that system, he's willing to sacrifice anyone who threatens it. Not because he's cruel, but because he's convinced himself the system's worth more than the individuals within it. And that belief, that valuing structure over people, it's the lie at the heart of every oppressive government. And Carol, killing Lance, she's rejecting that lie. She's saying people matter more than systems. And if the system requires Lance, then the system can die too. Dead City Season 1 gives us the Croat, and he's Negan's ghost. Played by Jelsko Ivanek, the Croat leads the Barazi in post-apocalypse Manhattan, and he's brutal, theatrical, and cruel. But here's what makes him the worst character of Dead City. He's what Negan could have stayed. He's the saviors without any code, Negan's methods without Negan's rules. And watching Negan react to the Croat, watching Jeffrey Dean Morgan's face as he sees his old self reflected back, it's devastating, because the Croat proves Negan changed, and the contrast between who Negan was and who he's become, that's the worst thing the Croat can show him. The Croat and Negan have history. Before the saviors, they were together, building something, and then they split, and Negan went one way, and the Croat went another, and the Croat's way was darker. He tortures, kills for sport, runs Manhattan like a kingdom of nightmares. And Negan, working with Maggie to rescue Herschel, he's confronted with what he escaped. The Croat doesn't have Negan's charm or his rules. He's just violence, and he enjoys it. And Negan, watching, realizes how close he came to being that, how thin the line was between the Savior's brutal order and the Croat's chaotic cruelty. And that realization, that understanding of how easily he could have become the Croat, it shakes him. The emotional anchor is Negan watching the Croat torture someone, and Maggie watching Negan's horror. Lauren Cohan and Jeffrey Dean Morgan have chemistry that's painful and complicated, because Maggie's the widow of the man Negan killed, and Negan's the man trying to redeem himself, and the Croat's proof that redemption's possible, because Negan didn't become this. And Maggie, seeing Negan's revulsion, it doesn't forgive him, but it shows her he's changed. And that knowledge that Negan's growth is real and measurable by comparison to the Croat, it's the closest thing to resolution their relationship will ever have. The theory here is that the Croat's the worst in Dead City because he's the mirror. He shows Negan what he could have been, and by extension, he shows us what redemption means. It's not erasing the past. It's choosing a different future. And Negan's chosen. He's not the Croat. He's not Lucille swinging, line-up executing Negan anymore. He's someone trying, imperfectly, to be better. And the Croat, refusing that choice, staying brutal and cruel and enjoying it, he's the path not taken. And that makes him dangerous in a different way. Not to the communities, though he is, but to Negan's sense of self. Because if Negan can become better, then the Croat can too. And the Croat's refusal, his choice to stay a monster, it's a rejection of the possibility that people can change. And that nihilism, that insistence that you are what you've done and nothing more, it's the worst philosophy Dead City presents. Here's the question for you. Does Negan's redemption make the Croat worse? Or is that just convenient? If the Croat's irredeemable, then Negan's growth looks better by comparison. But maybe the Croat's just honest about what he is, and Negan's lying to himself. Maybe there's no redemption for people who've done what they've done, and the best you can hope for is to stop making it worse. Or maybe redemption's always possible, and the Croat's worst because he won't even try. There's no clean answer. But the show asks us to think about it, to sit with the discomfort of watching Negan, a man who killed Glenn, trying to be better while confronting a man who's everything Negan was, and worse. And Maggie, caught in the middle. She's the arbiter of whether Negan's earned forgiveness. And she hasn't given it. But she's working with him. And that collaboration, painful and fragile, it's proof that even the worst people can sometimes do good. Or at least, they can try. And maybe trying's enough. Maybe that's all we can ask. Because the Croat doesn't try. And that's what makes him the worst character in Dead City. Not what he is, but what he refuses to become. Daryl Dixon. Seasons 1 and 2 give us Dr. Genet, and she's the culmination of every worst character we've explored. Played by Anne Charrier, Genet's a scientist leading Pouvoir du Vivant, a fascist movement in post-apocalypse France. And she's creating variant walkers, the kind that climb, use tools, adapt. And that choice, to make the apocalypse worse on purpose, to weaponize the dead in pursuit of power and control, that makes her the worst character across the entire franchise. Because every other villain adapted to the apocalypse, Genet's trying to own it. And that difference between surviving the end and trying to control it, that's the line between tragic and monstrous. Let's look at the evidence. In Daryl Dixon, we see Genet's labs, her experiments, her variant walkers. She's testing, refining, creating, and her philosophy's clear. Power comes from controlling what others fear. The communities fear walkers. So if she can control walkers, make them better weapons, then she controls the future. And she's building a movement, Pouvoir du Vivant, that's authoritarian, nationalist, willing to sacrifice anyone for the collective vision. And Daryl, watching this, seeing what science without ethics creates, he's horrified. Norman Reedus plays Daryl's horror quietly, with tight jaw and hard eyes. And you can see he's realizing that the apocalypse isn't over. It's evolving. And people like Genet are making it worse. The emotional anchor is Daryl's face. He's seen a lot. The governor, Negan, Alpha, Beta. But Genet's different. She's not reacting to the apocalypse. She's shaping it. And that ambition, that belief that she can rebuild civilization by controlling death itself, it's beyond anything Daryl's encountered. And he doesn't have Rick or Carol or Judith to help him process it. He's alone in France, far from home, confronting a villain who represents everything TWD's been warning about. The refusal to accept the world as it is. The insistence on bending it to your will. The belief that power justifies any atrocity. And Genet, calmly explaining her vision, her experiments. She's convinced she's saving humanity. And Daryl, who spent a decade protecting people, learning that protecting isn't enough if someone's actively making the threat worse. It's devastating. The theory here is that Genet's the worst character across all TWD seasons because she's trying to control the outbreak. Every other villain accepted the apocalypse and adapted. The governor built Woodbury. Negan built the saviors. Alpha joined the dead. But Genet's rejecting the apocalypse as final. She's saying, I can fix this, I can control this, I can weaponize this. And that refusal, that insistence that the world can be bent to her vision, it makes the apocalypse permanent. Because if variant walkers become widespread, if her experiments escape her control, and they will, they always do, then the dead aren't just walkers anymore. They're smarter, faster, more dangerous. And humanity's fragile foothold, the communities that have survived a decade, they're all in danger. Because Genet couldn't accept that some things can't be controlled. And her ambition, her refusal to just survive and rebuild, it's going to kill people who've done nothing except try to live. Here's the question. Is trying to control the outbreak worse than just surviving it? Genet would say no. She'd say science is humanity's tool, that understanding and controlling the virus is the only way forward, that communities like Alexandria are just delaying the inevitable. And maybe she has a point. Maybe survival without progress is just waiting to die. But the cost of her progress, the variant walkers, the experiments, the people used as test subjects, it's monstrous. And Daryl, fighting her, he's defending a philosophy we've seen throughout TWD, that humanity's worth preserving, not because we can control death, but because we choose to care for each other despite it. And Genet, in her lab, surrounded by walkers, she's made worse. She's the opposite of that philosophy. She's chosen power over care, control over compassion. And that choice, that belief that she can own the apocalypse, it makes her the worst. Because every other worst character we've discussed, they hurt people. But Genet's hurting the future, and that's unforgivable. We're back in that boiler room now, back with Laurie's hand reaching for Carl. And after tracing 13 seasons and spin-offs of worst characters, after exploring Merle's poison and Shane's pragmatism and Negan's brutality and Genet's ambition, that gesture means something different. Laurie's reaching not just for comfort, she's reaching into the future, shaping Carl with her final choice, and Carl taking her hand and then raising that gun. He's reaching back, and the space between those reaches, the moment where connection becomes necessity, that's what every worst character creates. They reach into other people's lives, shape them, break them, force them into choices they wouldn't have made otherwise. And the consequences, the trauma, the transformations, they outlive the person who caused them. Shane's methods influenced Rick's darkness. Every brutal choice Rick made in later seasons, every time he chose survival over mercy, that's Shane's ghost. Laurie's indecision created the Rick-Shane war, and her death drove Carl's hardness. Carl, who shot his mother, became the boy who could kill without hesitation, who suggested killing the saviors in their sleep, who lost his childhood to the necessities his mother's choices created. Negan's violence became a template. The Croat copied it. Lance copied it in bureaucratic form. Genet's copying it in scientific form. Every worst character creates ripples, and those ripples become waves, and the waves reshape everyone they touch. And the worst characters aren't the ones who died badly. They're the ones who lived badly, made choices that echoed, and forced everyone around them to live with the consequences. The question we started with was, what makes a character worst? And the answer, traced through 13 seasons, is this. Worst isn't cruelty. It's consequence. Worst is the character whose choices create damage that outlives them, whose actions shape people into versions of themselves they didn't want to become. Merle made Daryl question his worth. Shane made Rick question his leadership. Laurie made Carl question his humanity. The governor made Michonne question her capacity for revenge. Negan made Maggie question forgiveness. And Genet's making Daryl question whether protecting people is enough, or if he needs to fight the systems creating the threats. Every worst character is a catalyst, forcing transformations that are painful, necessary, and irreversible. And the survivors, carrying those transformations, they're proof that worst isn't about who you kill, it's about who you change, and whether that change makes them stronger or just breaks them in ways they'll carry forever. The hands reaching through the fence, the image from our hook transformed. They're unclear now. Are they reaching for help or reaching to harm? Are they too late or just in time? And maybe that ambiguity's the point, because in The Walking Dead, every reach is both. Every choice to help is also a risk. Every choice to protect might hurt. Every reach into someone's life shapes them, and you don't get to control how. You just reach and hope and live with what your reach creates. And the worst characters are the ones who reached and didn't care what they created, who shaped people's lives and walked away, or died, or turned into walkers, leaving the survivors to carry the weight of choices that were never theirs, but now define them. That's the real horror of The Walking Dead. Not the walkers, not the apocalypse, but the understanding that people shape each other, constantly, irrevocably, and sometimes the worst damage comes from the people who loved you or led you, or just happened to be there when the world was ending and you needed someone to tell you what to do. And their answer, their choice, their reach, it becomes yours, and you carry it forever. And that's worse than dying. Because at least when you're dead, you stop reaching. But the living, the survivors, they keep reaching into the dark, into the future, into each other. And every reach is hope and harm at once. And maybe that's all we can do. Reach anyway, and hope the harm we cause is less than the help we give. And know always that we'll never be certain. We'll just keep reaching until we can't anymore.